As a child, when people would ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? My responses consisted of firefighter, veterinarian, and CEO. But one thing stayed constant. My real answer was a Pokemon trainer. You could have convinced me I got a Trico in heaven, I would have fell to my knees every night. I'd always hit the bed at 8 p.m. the night before in hopes I'd wake up in time to catch the newest episode in the morning. Although I love the games, to me it was much more intriguing to see how Pokemon would respond to different moves as compared to the limitations of turn-based combat. I was drawing up game plans on how Infernape could take Electivire, felt like my true calling. So when I saw a commercial in spring 2009 that I'd get to play as Pikachu, I begged my mom to take me to GameStop as soon as the weekend hit. But I was in the minority of Pokemon fans that did. PokePark on the Wii didn't sell relatively well when you consider the numbers that the rest of the mainline titles were putting up. It seemed Game Freak couldn't believe it also, so they doubled down on the idea with Pokepark 2, which also didn't likely perform to expectations, and they haven't revisited the idea since. However, watching the reveal for Pokemon Legends ZEA and the Pokemon lagging behind their trainers, I realized for the first time I didn't want to be a Pokemon trainer, I wanted to be a Pokemon. But I didn't get the chance to, so why didn't it work? Well, 13 years have passed and it now seems like the perfect time to revisit the concept of being Pokemon rather than simply commanding Pokemon. The original game consists of Pikachu meeting a mythical being in a dream who informs the little yellow guy that the fate of the Pokepark lies on his shoulders. To save everyone, Pikachu would have to earn Sky Prism pieces that come from clearing attractions in various zones. These attractions become easier given the friends that you make along the way, and to make these friends you'll end up doing a variety of tasks. Often chase or battling, but there's also quizzes, obstacle courses, building bridges, sometimes even just seeking them out. The game emphasizes friendship, and it's said friendship that ends up saving the Pokepark in the end. It's an entirely new park the second time around, but not much else changes from a game design perspective, except that you unlock 3 more characters, the Unova region starters, who each have their own unique abilities. The story still emphasizes friendship, but instead of simply visiting different zones to make amends with arguing Pokemon, it consists of saving Dream Park, where Piplup and other Pokemon are being held hostage. These games are definitely not meant to be played in your 20s when your morals are already established, but after playing back through them for this video, I still thoroughly enjoyed witnessing how all of the Pokemon interacted in the environment. For a spin-off made a decade and a half ago, the title feels very immersive, in some ways more than recent releases, so how does it end up selling so poorly? Bear with me for a second while I completely disregard everything I just mentioned besides battling. Over the span of the game, Pikachu gets 3 moves: Tackle, Thunderbolt, and Iron Tail. That's one more move than any other character in the game. In fact, most Pokemon in battle only have a single move. I can recall as a kid growing frustrated that as soon as I use the same Thunderbolt and Tackle combo I've done every single time, the Pokemon goes invincible. You just have to wait for them to get up and start spamming the same move. A high health bar doesn't lead to a climactic fight. It just means I've got to do the same thing 5 times in a row. There's no super effective moves, no real strategy to it, and the battles take very little time, which, if the battles were actually a bit more fun, I would see as a downside. You can strengthen your character, but the only impact it has is making it through the game faster. There's simply not enough variability to keep the game interesting, not enough substance to do anything which might resemble what I considered to be a Pokemon battle. The Wii just couldn't produce battles like we watched on our screens growing up, but we've got something that can now. Pokemon battling is the main thing people associate with Pokemon, but it feels like combat is limited and that there has to be some way for the trainer to loiter around. They have to be the ones calling the shots. If Abomasnow uses Blizzard, freezes the stage, it's neat, but it means nothing to me. I'm still just clicking for Pikachu to use Iron Tail. However, if I'm slipping and sliding, controlling Pikachu, I feel much more involved in what I'm doing. When you play NBA 2K, you don't want to play as LeBron's coach yelling at him to dunk it. You want to be LeBron. Remove the middleman. By focusing on the smaller details, you reduce the need for new gimmicks, make your experience unique, even if using the same Pokemon as someone else. Really, individuality is a focal point of the franchise. I understand that it's not feasible from both a development time and data storage perspective to allow me to play as a detailed version of any of the 1,000 Pokemon that exist now. Ideally, there'd be more than just the yellow mouse. But whether there's one or a couple to choose from, the traditional level system could work more in line with a skill tree. Maintaining the 4-move cap would have you decide on what best suits your playstyle, helping the player to feel powerful, not just because the god of Pokemon sits in your pocket. By making the game solely Pokemon, you also open up new directions for the storylines. Mainline Pokemon games are historically heavy on lore, but they all have mostly the same overarching mission. Beat some gym leaders, about 8 of them, knock off a couple evildoers, catch a Pokemon completely unfathomable to be contained by a ball, then go get one last run in so you can be the champion. At times, the tried and true formula feels comforting, but when the game is released not feeling finished or non-engaging, it just feels cookie cutter. Nowadays, we have a Pokemon for just about everything. Dive deeper into some of that commingling, without the need for the trainer's life purpose to drive the storyline. The best thing is that one of the other spin-offs happens to also be solely Pokemon, and has the most plot twist, heartbreaking story in the franchise. Talk about remake of the century if I didn't need to fight restricted to 45-degree angles. Not having a trainer has some limitations. Whenever they go the route of voice acting, I don't want Sudowoodo speaking to me in plain English, but this opens many more doors than it closes. The Legends series seems to be the testing ground of new ideas. Legends Arceus speed styles incorporated a more realistic speed dynamic, and now we see Legends EA focusing on free movement of the Pokemon associated with the trainer's movement. While moves are being made in the right direction, it's time to go off the deep end and let me be the legend. Many expressed concern in Game Freak's technical capabilities upon the release of Scarlet and Violet. Fortunately for them, the exposure of Scarlet and Violet's bugs seemingly boosted the sales of the game. I can only hope that was a wake-up call to catch up with the times. Not because interest in turn-based games is fading, that it's almost standard to have selectable difficulty options, but because in their transition from 2D to 3D games, they have not capitalized on the potential we know to exist. It's time to breathe life back into a video game franchise which is largely sustained by the emotional attachment people have to previous titles. History is not short on games that were huge at a time and then fell off due to repeated misses. Pokemon's proved especially resilient due to their massive presence in other mediums, but everything has its limits. Here's to hoping Game Freak can signal new life by another attempt at leaving the biggest limitation out. Before you go, just want to say I appreciate you watching till the end. It's very likely this is your first time encountering my channel. Here's to hoping it's not the last. I just wish there was a way to guarantee that. Either way, you have a good one.